happy to welcome Richa Agarwal. Richa is a senior manager admissions at ISB, and she has kindly taken out time to talk to us and discuss specific nuances about the program and the application. And I will be hosting the session. I'm Prashant Tibrewal. I'm the founder of ISBmantra, and I've been helping candidates, mentoring applicants to ISB and other business schools for the last 10 years.
Thank you so much, Prashant, for that warm welcome. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And we look forward to a very engaging and insightful session tonight.
Thanks, Richa. So interestingly, you've been interacting with students a lot over the last 1 month through the info sessions, through other sessions, and there's a lot that candidates know in the digital age. There's a lot on the website, and recently, interestingly, I was at a session where there was an interview with Byju's, and it was called Point Blank with Byju's. So I don't want it to be point blank with Richa, but we will discuss some very specific questions about the program and the applications, and we hope to bring in insights beyond hopefully what candidates have already learned and listened to in several other sessions. And that's also because when we work with candidates at ISBmantra, there are some very specific questions that candidates ask, and we hope that candidates have answers to them before they apply to the program. So we will touch upon that, and the key question that always remains in every applicant's mind is, what does ISB look for? Who is an ideal candidate for ISB?
Well, great, Prashant. So, often people ask me this question that what is that ideal candidate, or what is that one right candidate? So I don't know if you like this answer, but there is no ideal candidate at ISB. We treat each applicant, each candidate as a unique profile, right? Each year, ISB receives a pool of applicants which are unique and diverse in their own fashion. And we respect that diversity. At ISB, diversity is huge. So there is no one ideal candidate, but yes, there are unique profiles, there are diverse profiles, and that's how ISB takes it forward.
Okay, so what you're saying is that there is not one formula to get into ISB. There are multiple ways that one can present their profile. There are multiple profiles that candidate can apply to ISB with, and that's the beauty of the program. A class of about 900 that can assimilate and integrate a wide range of candidates. So that brings me to a related question on what differentiates someone who gets into ISB and someone who doesn't.
Right, great. So important question here again, Prashant. So while there are different parameters on which a candidate or a profile is evaluated, but all of them essentially fall in three broad buckets, right? The first one is the academic potential. The second one is the professional pedigree. And the third is ultimately his contribution to the ISB community, while as a student to the student community, and post the graduation, how one can contribute to the alum community, right? So ultimately, all of these candidates fall in these three broad buckets, irrespective of the number of parameters that I've talked about in umpteen number of my sessions. These are three broad buckets.
Right, and that makes sense. And that's something that candidates are fairly aware of, that ISB asks for your academic scores, your GPAs, your GMAT. That is the first bucket that you talked about. Then, of course, their professional experience and what they have done at work, what they have done outside work, if there's something in the leadership positions that they have taken up. And then the third bucket of peer contribution that you talked about, again, something that is also apparent from the SA1 of the application.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yes.
So let's dive deeper, and instead of just talking about the fact that ISB looks at these things, the larger question remains, what if a candidate is not able to demonstrate strength on these areas? Because yes, it's an easy path. If I'm from an IIT with a 9-point GPA, I have fairly high GMAT of a 750, 760. I've worked with probably a big organization, and hopefully I have done some solo traveling as well. But then, what if a candidate hasn't done any of these things? What if they're not from an IIT? What if they don't have? I mean, probably let's take it one at a time and focus on a GPA, which is something that you don't have control over at this point. So you
Absolutely.
probably completed your education 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, and you realize that, oh, I didn't study, or I couldn't get the right academic scores then. Do I
Mhm.
still have a chance at ISB, or is it is the door closed now?
Great. So, yes, Prashant, to answer to your question, are the doors open? Absolutely, right? Because at ISB, we understand that, you cannot go back in the past and change whatever has been done, right? We always, in my session, keep talking about control the controllables. So, how can you control this element? So, while this is one of the parameters, how can you work on other parameters that can ultimately push your score, the ultimate profile score up? So while test scores, which is the GMAT or GRE, whichever the candidates are writing, I think is a great space to ultimately show that you have the academic rigor to manage the pace of ISB PGP program. Because I think the students have to keep asking them that why is it important for ISB? If ISB is considering this parameter, why? How does it stitch in the overall process? So the whole theme or the underlying concept is that do you have it in you to manage the rigor, the 1 year rigorous PGP program at ISB? So your earlier academic potential is a reflection, you're ready. So if you feel, if you're not confident of your 10th, 12th graduation, I think another space or placeholder is to work at your scores and prove it to us that you're ready to bring on and take on the rigor.
Okay. So you're saying yes, if you have a great score, very good. But then when you ask yourself the question why ISB is looking for this particular parameter, you say that you can still go ahead and prove it or establish it with a high GMAT or GRE.
Yeah.
But interestingly, we do have candidates, and also I see in our chat we have someone asking that I have a 650 GMAT. Can I still apply in round two? So
Yeah.
what if I'm not able to get a high test score and I still
Mhm.
want to apply to ISB? Is there a cutoff? Is there a score which will get me in or not get me in? How do you look at it internally?
Right. Again, a very important question, Prashant. So, yes, it's absolutely possible that you've written your exam and you've not got the desired X score, so to say, in GMAT or GRE, right? And it's in our head that it's not a high score. But first, if you look at the range of scores, right, we would all agree that at ISB there is again no one right score to crack the ISB code, so to say, right? It's a range of scores that we accept. So, for example, if I have to take up GMAT, the range is 610 to 780. Now, 610 is definitely not a high score, yet those candidates have made it to the PGP cohort. We have students, and this is not a prescribed range of ISB, this is a range in which the current class is. The current 880 students of ISB are in this range of GMAT, and similarly for GRE, we have 305 to 339. So there are low scores, there are average scores, there are high scores. So what made them to the ISB cohort is the next question I'm sure everybody will be thinking. So guys, first, to match the academic rigor, you could be having additional certifications which you can showcase, which can highlight your technical strengths, so to say, right? You could also talk about experiences from workplace. Ultimately, why is it important? One, yes, to be able to manage the rigor of the program. And if I have to zoom out and look at it largely, to be able to manage complexities at a workplace, right? To be able to manage a business complexity. So, is your brain ready for having that additional lens to be looking at that different perspective is what we're looking at. So you could possibly cite examples from your workplace where you handled projects or where you handled data, etc. Right. So these are also additional placeholders for you to showcase that if I have my average low to average CGPA, if I have my low to average GMAT GRE, I still have the potential to manage a business complexity. So that is something that you will have to focus on again in various placeholders. You can talk about it either in your essays, you could talk about it in awards and achievements or additional education or hobbies, etc. So yes, you have additional space to highlight ultimately that side of you to be able to manage business complexities. Yeah.
Right, that makes sense. And we do have candidates asking if they should take up some courses on Coursera, or if they should
Right.
take some certifications on different platforms. And then the follow-up question is, which courses? Should it be fundamentals of finance? Should it be communication? And probably what you're trying to say is, look at what is the missing piece on your profile, and if it is communication, if it is people skills, probably take up a course and show that you're working towards it. You identify that this is something that your work, because we don't always have control over the nature of our work in terms of
Correct.
exactly what we do. But then, based on the nature of your work, if you see that your work involves high amount of working with data, working with financial tools, then it is in your benefit that you present it right and present it well through your application. And if
Absolutely.
not, then there are Coursera courses where you can, or multiple platforms, and Coursera was the pioneer, but then now there are so many that you can leverage and take up these courses and put it across to ISB.
Yeah, and just to add one another additional pointer here, because again, we would all agree that ultimately in a business canvas, in a corporate canvas, it's not about intuitive decision making, right? Decision making should always be data driven. So one needs to exhibit a basic understanding of maths or the data or analytical ability. And that's why these scores have been introduced to make you ready, to prepare you. It's like the winds begin beneath your wings, right? It allows you to take that flight. So that's why it's important. Yeah.
Right, and then probably I relate with it, given that the range of, or the variety of candidates, the diversity of candidates that apply to ISB could be someone as diverse as a fashion designer. I
Yeah.
remember there was a former Miss India who had applied
Right.
recently, and often as part of your education and work, you're not exposed to data. And then when you go on to take a test like a GMAT or GRE, you are able to establish that in the class
Absolutely.
where I will be studying statistics, finance, analytics, I will be able to understand what is being taught and pass the
Yes.
classes.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes.
Great. So that takes care of the academic bucket, and how someone who doesn't have the best GMAT or GRE or
Mm.
GPAs can still present their potential. The second bucket that you talked about was professional experience or professional background.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of questions around what kind of professional background is suitable to ISB. So candidates have concerns about, because the class average is about 4 years,
Right.
and someone with 2 years of experience, 2.5 years of experience would think, oh, should I wait for another 2 years? Or someone
Right.
with 7 years of experience would think, oh, am I late by 3 years? So what does the class average of 4 years mean? And how does ISB look at someone with low work X versus high work X?
Great, lovely. So, Prashant, yes, while the class average is about 4.5 to 5 years, but again, if you look at the class profile of 2023, so to say, which is the current cohort, again, it's a range of work experience. So, we have candidates, we have students with 2 years to 22 years of work experience in the class. Again, it's not a prescribed range of ISB, it's the range, work experience range in which the current students are there, right? So now coming to the next question, that how does one compare against the other? So put simply, we do not compare somebody who's got 2 years or less than 2 years of experience. We have EU candidates who are applying to the program as well. We do not compare these profiles with those who've got, let's say, 5, 10, or maybe 20 years of experience. They are treated independently and they are unique, right? There is a separate treatment, and we'll talk more about it. There is a separate treatment in the way we handle the 2 to 4, the 4 to 6, the 6 to 8, the senior folks. So the treatment is different. They are not compared. It's not an apple to apple comparison, so to say, right? The third important point here is, Prashant, that ISB ultimately is looking for candidates who've exhibited, or who are exhibiting, or who will be exhibiting future leadership potential. right? We are building future leadership pipeline. So for those who've got less number of years of experience, we understand that your exposure to the corporate canvas has been less. Could be 1 month, could be 2 months, anything less than 2 years, right? Here, the expectation is not that you are leading or holding a leadership position. However, you have leadership potential. That's the difference, right? So through your essays, through your extracurriculars, you could be leading the sports club, so to say. You could be volunteering in an NGO, so to say, or you could be initially taking charge of a project. Talk about the challenges, talk about the way you're leading the team, not even being the leader. Leader is not a designation as well. These are skill sets that one exhibits, right? So these are my 2 cents, that these are various ways wherein the low work experience, so to say, have enough space, enough creativity to showcase their leadership skill sets. Vis-a-vis somebody who's got more number of years of experience, they have proven leadership trajectory, right? They have over a period of X number of years handled projects, handled various challenges at business, led teams, led projects, where they have enough and more pedigree to talk about their hits, their misses, the success stories, their failure stories, etc. So they will have to talk about the kind of impact and the contribution that they have done to that project in that organization. So there are two different approaches, right? So not comparable. Yeah.
Interesting. So it's important to understand that someone with low work experience wouldn't be
Yeah.
pitched against someone with high work ex, and vice versa. But what's interesting that you mentioned is potential versus position. That, obviously it takes time to grow into a certain position, but then one can always demonstrate that potential in just 1 year or 2 years. Okay,
Yeah.
so great, that can be done, and I believe that can be done through the initiatives you have taken at work, through the kind of work you have done, probably outside your work as well. So there are multiple ways to demonstrate that potential that you're looking at through the application.
Right.
Whereas what is also interesting is how you talk about proven leadership trajectory for candidates with high work ex, because the application gives enough opportunity to present that. So you may
Right.
have done great things, but then if you are not able to establish your leadership potential versus someone who just has leadership potential, so if you're not able to establish your leadership trajectory, then you're not approaching the application right.
Right. Absolutely.
Good. And then, of course, someone in the mid range, like 3 to 5 years, will need to do a bit of both, like show that they have demonstrated
Absolutely.
and the potential.
Yes. Yes. They are the sweet spot, as we call it.
Great. So good. That helps one present the work X in terms of leadership. But then, what else do you look at when you look at someone's professional experience? Like, some candidates are concerned that they have never worked with an MNC.
Oh,
Some
yeah.
candidates are concerned about the fact that they have a primarily technical role, because
Yeah.
India is a country of engineers, having worked with some of the best tech companies, IT companies. So what do you
Right.
call good professional experience? Is it with the best organization? Sometimes I have worked with an organization ISB may not have heard about. So how do you measure
Right.
that?
Great question again, Prashant. So, well, the measurement of quality of professional experience is, guys, not the number of years of experience, is not the salary that you're drawing, is not the brand of the organization that you come from. You could be coming from a marquee organization, the big fours, the FANG, the top 500 Fortune companies. You could be a startup owner. You could be coming from the family business, right? So all of this is not important. What is important is your contribution to the profile that you're handling in the project within the organization. What is important for us is what you bring to the table, right? You would possibly not have seen multiple promotions. So let's say you were working in an organization for 4 years, you were a manager then, you're a manager now. You've not seen promotions. Does it mean it's going to impact your candidature? No. Possibly your profile has evolved. What you've been handling in last 4 years, that has evolved. The depth of your profile has increased. You as a working professional has evolved. That is what we are looking for, right? So all of these myths about salary and the work experience and the brand of the organization, this is not the measurement. These are not the parameters of qualifying or measuring professional experience, so to say.
Right. So, and what I would add is when one is submitting their application or developing their application, there is a section where you have to write a line about your organization. And
Right.
probably that's also a place to introduce yourself, not just yourself, but also your organization in the best possible way, because it is not natural for a reader to know all the organizations in the world. There are a lot of
Yeah.
startups, there are a lot of organizations that are doing well. But then the way we introduce the organization also gives an understanding of the size and scale and the nature of work of the organization. And if you're working with an organization, for example, if they have recently raised Series B or C funding, and you've been a part of that organization during that period, then it goes without saying that you have got that kind of exposure. And
Right.
such organizations are growing so fast that you've been a part of that growth. So
Right.
that's something that sometimes just introducing your organization well adds a lot of value versus just saying, this is what I do.
Also, if you look at it this way, Prashant, somewhere when we've been talking about how important diversity is to ISB. So it works, it augurs well for the brand, for the overall experience of a student on the campus, that you represent different organizations, scales of organization. You could be coming from a startup, you could be a founder, co-founder of that startup itself, you could be coming from a family business. So it also augurs well for your overall learning experience, this representation. So, which is also important to ISB.
Right. So that applies to family business as well, which is a question that comes very often now that I'm from a family business background, and
Absolutely.
will it be considered work experience in the first place?
Is it
And
a valid experience?
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
interesting. And then obviously, professional experience. When we talk about the measuring the quality of professional experience, there's a lot that goes on during the interview as well, and we would love to talk about it towards the end of the session, where we would want to understand what does ISB look for during the interview, and what goes behind the scenes, because candidates
Yeah.
have no idea once they are done with the interview, how does the process work behind the scenes. Okay, what happens after the interview is done. So we'll come to that, but before that, we also need to understand the fact that you talked about three buckets, and the third one was
Yeah.
peer contribution or diversity. So how does ISB define diversity?
Great. So, Prashant, when we talk about diversity, yes, the one bucket is the underrepresentation of an industry or a function that you represent. But you could be also coming from an industry or function which is just so usual, run of the mill. Ultimately, what ISB is looking at, that what you contribute to the class discussion, what you bring to the table. The challenges that each candidate faces could be unique to their profile, could be unique to the kind of project that he or she is handling, right? So ISB is more interested in that story, because ultimately, in a class discussion, in a study group, five of y'all, and all five of y'all come from, and the faculty and the academic team ensures that all five of y'all represent different industries, different function, and also different work experiences. In a group study of five, you will have somebody with 2 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, 20 years mandatorily. So what we look for is each of you has their own unique experience, faced your own unique challenges, and your approach to handle that challenge, your approach to not give up, to overcome that, and to beat it to its tomb, that is more important. So what you bring to the table, to the class discussions, that is something that ISB is looking for, and that is something which will contribute to your diversity in the profile.
Okay. So essentially, you're talking about one's ability to add value to the class,
Yeah.
and if you are adding value owing to the diverse experience, we talked about doctors, army officers, candidates from, let's say, a NIFT background, started accountancy background. So it could be through that. But then what about the pool of candidates who are from the overrepresented pool? I mean, let's say the typical Indian IT male that one is stereotyped as. So how do they add value to the class? How do what can they potentially come with, which ISB will value and say that, oh, even if this candidate is from an overrepresented pool, and when you look at the class profile, last year class profile, there are about 57% who are from an engineering background.
Right.
So how do these 57% add value to the class?
Right. So, Prashant, we need to understand then when we talk about diversity, the unconventional profiles or those underrepresented pool, they're just about 10 to 12%. But the larger cohort, the 88 to the 90% of the cohort, is actually coming from what we say as the overrepresented or very next door profile, a typical engineering profile, etc. So definitely what he brings to the cohort, we've been talking about how you will add value to your other peers, right? What's in for you is how you will leverage ISB, how you will move to the next career orbit, etc. But ultimately, it's also important for ISB to understand what you're going to contribute. So, well, in the application form, not just the essay, but through your employment tab, when you talk about the various challenges, the various, we've talked about in the earlier question as well, how you've just handled your current work profile again becomes very important. It's a reflection of the knowledge that you have gained over a period of time and the kind of stuff that you bring to the table. Also, another important parameter that I would like to touch upon is uh, talk about your other additional extracurricular activities, right? There is a dedicated placeholder in the application form which allows you this creative freedom to, you could be volunteering in an NGO, right? So how you will ultimately contribute to the social impact club that we have here at ISB, right? You could be a national level cricket player, not definitely playing for the country, not pursued it as a profession, but it has been a part of your hobby or your extracurricular. So how we automatically know that this student is going to be contributing to the sports club at ISB, right? So these are again various placeholders to talk about how you're going to contribute to the, not just the class, but overall your student experience. There are about 10 to 14 social clubs, professional clubs. All of these various activities also give us an opportunity to do the right fitment, that you're also going to be contributing to the various clubs, the various workshops, the conferences, and the conclaves that happen at the campus. Your contribution to these learning experiences also become very, very important.
Right. And I think a lot of ISB alumni talk about the entire ISB experience, which is not just inside the class, but so
Absolutely.
much. I mean, something as simple as or as basic as frisbee, which is so popular at ISB,
Yeah.
and all
Yeah.
the facilities that ISB provides. So I can relate with it. And it's interesting that you talk about hobbies, and so when you talk of the different placeholders in the ISB application, there is something about hobbies, and then there is awards and activities,
Right.
and I'd love to talk more about that because when candidates fill in that hobbies section, uh, there is one set of candidates who talk about bungee jumping and skydiving and everything, and then there
Right.
is one set of candidates who say, "Hey, I've not been reading a lot of books. Probably I watch a couple of movies a year." And
Yeah.
I haven't, I've, with COVID anyway, not a lot of us got to travel. But then there's a set of candidates who doesn't get to travel a lot because they are so busy at work. Uh,
Yeah.
so, so how is the hobbies section looked at? Because not everyone, or I would say, hardly 1% or 2% of the candidates would be national level achievers.
Absolutely, absolutely, right. So, which is true. I did talk about that those conventional profiles are just about 10 to 12%, right? And not everybody would be having a or pursuing a hobby. So that's why the two buckets, the one that you could be very, very active in your extracurriculars, you could be participating. So we have a TEDx speaker who's now also the president of Toastmasters Club. So this is one space where you can be creative and you can showcase your strengths, what you bring to the table. The second is to stitch your professional exposure, your professional experience into your personal upgradation, right? That what the challenges have taught you, what those professional failures have taught you, how you have evolved, and again how you can bring to the table. So these are the two broad buckets. You can be acing both of them, but definitely either one is going to be strong in your profile, given that you have certain years of experience, given that you have pursued or you would have pursued. Yes, but the one thing or the one advice that I can give to our lovely attendees is that it's just okay to not have a hobby. Guys, if you've so far never volunteered in an NGO, or if you've so far never done a marathon, just in next 1 month, don't make it as a hobby, right? So that is something that one has to be keeping in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's very valid. That when someone writes something in the application, and we are going to talk about it, how
Yeah.
it comes up in the interview as well. And if you've been doing it just for a month, there's not
Yeah.
much to talk about. And then you're not able to demonstrate that passion that a typical hobby or person who pursues a typical hobby has. So
Right.
what I hear is it's fine to not have a hobby that is very fancy. It's
Yeah.
okay to just mention something that you enjoy doing in your free time. It probably helps the reader understand your personality and
Yes.
everything that you want to present overall.
Yeah.
And beyond that, yes, most of us, beyond work, we just like to do something when we are free. So present that something that you can hopefully talk about during the interview for a couple of minutes.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. And then there's the other section about awards and activities. And I do see some questions in the chat as well. And this is again a genuine concern for a lot of candidates, especially a company like TCS would give out employee or star of the month award, whereas a
Yeah.
startup may not have that culture of employee because there are 10 employees. So they may
Right.
not be giving out employee of the month award every month, or they may not
Yeah.
have as many awards. So not everyone finds something very exciting to fill in those awards or professional awards
Absolutely.
section. So do they go back to their college where they got some awards 4 or 5 years ago, or do they present how they have achieved something irrespective of not getting an award at the workplace?
See, Prashant, I think it's very important to understand that again, why are we asking or soliciting that piece of information, right? It's because, see, overall, it has to fit in your story. If an award was given to you for sort of setting up a stall and volunteering for long, if it is not ultimately fitting in your what you've done before, what you want to do, what you're doing now, and what you want to do next in your overall career progression story, I think one should give it a pass. This is a placeholder for you to showcase exactly. If I have to take you back in my earlier question, that I have a low CGPA, I have a low score, but I yet want to demonstrate that I have it in me to handle the rigor, right? So it's okay to give it a pass if you don't have something from the most recent. Time is not important. I'm not going to give you a thumb rule that not later than 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. If it is important for your career progression, if it is adding to the story, if your overall story is connecting the dots, then go for it. Otherwise, you can give it a pass. There is going to be no negative marking, or nobody's going to penalize your candidature for that, so to say.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned that, look at the why than just presenting a certain award,
Yes.
because obviously you may have got a Star of the Month award, but when you are asked about it in the interview, and you don't have a solid reason why you got that award,
Yes.
then you find yourself in a difficult position, right?
Yes.
So, and clearly ISB, and this is something that often candidates ask, that will I have to provide certificates? I mean, you could provide all the certificates, but if you can't
Talk about
present,
it.
yeah, so that's why ISB doesn't even ask for certificates, right? That
Yes, absolutely. We don't even have
so
a placeholder to upload it. A lot of times students ask me, ma'am, can I email it to you? And I'll be like, no, we will take care of it at the interview.
Right. So your certificate is your answer in the interview. I mean, if you can answer
Yeah,
it
so
well, if you
it's
can
quite
present it
simple,
well.
guys. If you've not done it, give it a pass, because if you are not able to carry it well till the interview, that could be problematic. It's okay to not have done it rather than faking it. So, yeah,
Right. I think that's very valuable and valid. That don't just fill in an award and then cut a sorry figure during the interview.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's a good segue for us to move to the interview. We see that some candidates have done their interviews. Those who are applying in round two will go through the interview. So let's understand first who is on the ISB interview panel, because
right,
candidates are often curious who will I be interviewed by? Is it
right,
faculty? Is it admissions officers? Is it alumni? Is it a
right,
mix of that? So who
right.
is on the interview panel and how is the panel designed?
Right. So, Prashant, yes, ISB admission process has gone various changes over a period of time, structural changes as well. Now, currently on the panel, there are ISB PGP alums who will be recruiting future alums. Yeah.
Okay, that's sweet and short. And is there a logic behind assigning a panel to an alum to a candidate or an
Right.
interviewee, or
Right.
how does it work, and how many alumni are there on the panel?
Right. So the panel comprises of at least three alums. Two is a mandate and max three, because we do not want to intimidate the candidate, right? Imagine a candidate entering a room and he sees a panel of five alums. So we don't want to intimidate our candidates, because it's a stress-free interview, right? It's more of an interaction and a conversation. So we stick to 2 to 3 alums only. That's the panel structure. Now, how about how's the assignment of the panel that happens, right? So while there's no math or there's no algorithm wherein we sort of assign the candidate, but yes, there is a logic to it, right? We do a logical match that we say, and not the profile match. So let me explain what it means. So let's say if I have a lawyer, or if I have a doctor, or if I have somebody from manufacturing, I will not create or design a palm which has 3 doctors and push this candidate to that set of panel members. No, that's profile based profile matching. We do a logic matching. All of these alums have gone through the PGP program, so they have a basic understanding of all the functions through their various interactions. They have a certain understanding of the various industries. So we keep in mind the maturity level of the candidate, right? So somebody who's got 10 to 15 years of experience, could be a doctor, could be a lawyer, could be an entrepreneur, could be a working professional, irrespective of the industry or the function, he or she will be assigned to someone or to a set of alum members with whom he'll be able to have a conversation. The frequency match is there, the logical match is going to be there. So similarly, we'll have a set of panel members who will be able to handle the 8 to 10, 5 to 6, 2 to 4. So the work experience is kept in mind, but not as such the profile. The overall basic psyche should be able to be handled. So yeah.
Right. And it's very interesting to hear that there is a logical match and not a profile match, because practically it doesn't need a CA to test a CA. It's not. I mean, they're not getting into a CA exam, but they're getting into an MBA where they will have to demonstrate
Absolutely. This is
diverse
not
skill
a
sets.
technical round, right? So a lot of times people also ask me questions about what can we expect in the interview. And if I may spend 2 minutes here, that guys, it's not a technical round. There'll be no formulas. There'll be no code writing happening at the interview. It's a friendly conversation, trying to understand how you can sort of, overall contribute and do the right fitment to the cohort. So it's a very, very informal conversational it's not like a stress-based interview at all. No technical stuff. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So on that note, when you're talking about what is the
Yeah.
interview about, please tell us more. What does the interview panel look for? What are the parameters they are
Right.
probably asked to check or asked to understand when they talk to a candidate for ISB interviews?
Great. So a couple of things that we are looking for. in a candidate when they are sent or when they are shortlisted for the interview. When I briefly talked about the overall fitment of the ISB culture, it is one of the most important parameters, because we want to understand whether you're flexible, whether you're humble enough, whether you have the right temperament, the right attitude to learn from one another, to respect each other's space. Because ISB has a diverse set of 900 students who represent multi-industry, multi-function, multi-sized organizations, for that matter, the multi-range of work experience. Somebody from a 2 to 22 years of work experience is right there in that classroom. So whether or not we have the right attitude to accept one another, because ultimately, as soon as you enter the gates of ISB, you're no more the partner or the VP or a consultant or a senior consultant or a founder or director. You are a PGP student. That's the only one designation that all 900 students hold once they enter the ISB campus. So that is very, very important, because this is what ISB truly believes in, the fitment into the ISB culture. So that's important, the first. Second, because it's very important to understand your why MBA story, the why ISB story. So there are definitely going to be questions about what have you done in the past, your current stints, what you want to do next. That is exactly what the second essay is all about, right? Your career goals. So you want to understand, where does ISB fit into your story? How can ISB contribute to your success? Because your success is ISB's success. And it is important for ISB to be able to contribute to the candidate's success story in a very, very positive way. And thirdly, of course, Prashant, so before the interview, all the applications have to go through the review process, right? So each application goes through 2 reviews, wherein every aspect, whatever content has been written about his academic pedigree, about his professional career progression, whatever he's written in his 2 essays, the LOR, everything is reviewed carefully. And if there are certain observations, there are notes, there are inputs, there are those red flags, there are those little comments which are given in the application form. So then alums take care of these at the interview as well.
Okay, so what you're saying is the interviewers or the interview panel does have some inputs from the application reader, and
Yeah.
one, they are able to read the application and assess what they want to talk about with the candidate or with the interviewee. But then they are also guided by what has been provided to them in terms of inputs when their application was being reviewed.
Right, right. Because it is just obvious. They just care about little time to go through all the details before he allows the candidate to walk into the room. So these additional observations, they help to sort of summarize their questions and to know what to expect in that profile.
Right, and that makes a lot of sense when candidates come to us and say, "Oh, I was asked about this particular $100 million that I saved for my organization, and it was
Yeah,
somewhere in the middle of the essay, but the interviewers have really read my essays, and of course they read it, but then it is very likely that the application reader really wanted to understand how the candidate saved those millions of dollars or did whatever they wanted."
absolutely. Not just this, Prashant. I have interacted with alums. I met this alum in one of my Bombay info sessions, and she was saying that she had just casually mentioned in the hobby that she loves cake baking at the weddings. And the entire interview revolved around the wedding industry and the gifting industry. And she said that I wish I should have not written it. So so it's not just the essay, even what you write in your hobbies, in the extra awards and the achievements. Always keep asking, why am I writing this? Have I really contributed in whatever I'm writing? Just suddenly don't go start volunteering in an NGO or start feeding dogs on the streets at night. Do you really believe in the cause? Are you really invested in whatever you're doing? How have you impacted? How many dogs have you saved? How many street stray dogs are there at all? You can actually get into those conversations, and believe you me, beyond a point, it's difficult to fake it.
Right. No,
Yeah.
that's very interesting because there are certainly cases where candidates have told us that they were not asked about why they want to do an MBA, but they were asked
Yes.
about why they chose to do this as whatever they wrote in their hobbies
Yeah.
or something, and the entire conversation was about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. And then these conversations happen, the alumni or the interviewers put in their comments, and we would love to hear some of the comments maybe. But then there is some process behind it. So what happens? What happens once the candidate is done with the interview, and then what are the things looked at? Is a bad interview red flag altogether, or how does it work?
Well, the real action starts now, if I have to put it. So, well, interview is not the ultimate make or the break of a candidate's journey to ISB. It is one of the evaluation components in the overall holistic approach that we take, right? So we've talked about the various components, parameters that are looked into. There are the each application is carefully assessed, reviewed before the candidate is pushed to the next round, which is the interview. So we call it something like the application quality score, right? Post interview, you are assigned a interview quality score. So after the interview is conducted, the consolidation happens. We add your interview score to your application quality score, which therefore decides whether you are offered, you're waitlisted, you're rejected. If you're offered, whether or not you are awarded the scholarship, you're not awarded the scholarship. So all of this decision making happens after the interview, the behind the scene action.
Great. And I believe for round one, since the results are due very soon in a few days, this action must be going on.
Yes, it is. There is a lot of action on the floor currently because the R1 results are expected on the 18th. So, yes, the next 3 days are crucial and it's going to be very interesting. The real drama is happening right now.
Okay, amazing. And as much as we would love to be a part of that drama, we know we cannot. So
I won't miss anything at all, though.
good, but then we do have. I mean, talking of interviews, there's still some curiosity. So Harshit asks whether the interview panel has access to the GMAT scores. If not, why
Right.
not?
Thank you, Harshit, for that question, which I missed sort of answering in one of those questions. So, not just the alums, even the AdCom team members, when they are reviewing your essays, we are not privy to your scores. The scores are masked. We are only privy to the content part, right? Which would be the essays, your academic journey, da 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 da, that the various components that I've talked about. So we do not have access to your scores. We do not even want to know about the scores. A lot of times people say that, ma'am, in my leadership, can I talk that I have aced my GMAT? And I want to understand that scores are not the reflection of your leadership skills. Why do you want to talk about it when we are not asking you, when we are not even having the access to see your scores? So I think it's a great initiative. We don't get bias. No bias is created looking at the score, and you have a level playing field to present your best case, to pitch your strengths, and and highlight the diversity in your profile.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense because it is very human to probably either positively or negatively get influenced by a high or low GMAT score.
Right.
So that's a great practice.
Yeah.
Okay, and you were just talking about scholarships and how the scholarship decisions are taken, uh, but we do have some questions around uh, should one apply now in round two if there are no scholarships or there are scholarships, or should one wait for next year and apply in round one to maximize their chance of a scholarship?
Great. So, Prashant, yes, there are scholarships. There are scholarships for all three rounds. However, what is different is that in R1, we have up to 100% of tuition fee waiver. In round two, it's up to 75% of the tuition fee waiver. R3 is further down, which is up to 50% of the tuition fee waiver, right? So that has to be kept in mind. With respect to a number of scholarships awarded, well, round one and round two are more or less similar. With respect to the units, the number of scholarships awarded, not talking about the value, because value there is a slight difference. But with respect to the behavior, I think R1, R2 is here, there, very, very comparable. R3 becomes a little competitive because one, less number of seats are left. Maximum number of scholarships have already been consumed by the R1, R2 candidates. So very less kitty is left for the R3. So R3 can get a little tricky and competitive, but R2 is quite comparable. There's not much difference in R1, R2, so to say. Yeah.
Interesting. So of course, you do have scholarships,
Yeah.
and if you're a candidate who needs an MBA now, apply now. Financing is generally not a problem.
Yeah.
And I'd like to highlight how ISB has good arrangement with banks. So I've not heard of anyone who couldn't afford their MBA at ISB.
And haven't heard of anybody who's defaulted any of the EMIs as well. So that has been the legacy of ISB. So you could go check out our website. We have a list of tie-ups with various banks. They all offer collateral-free loans. Your EMI starts only after you've been placed, after your joining has been completed. So the process is fairly simple and easy. And scholarships also, we have enough and more scholarships. Approximately 20 to 25% of the total cohort receives a scholarship. So I think the financial aid at ISB is quite commendable. Yeah.
Right. Good. And this is again another interesting area where candidates ask if they already have an MBA or another master's degree.
Right.
Some international schools say you cannot apply or you are a weaker candidate. How does it work if
Right.
work at ISB?
Great. So thank you, Tanvi, for asking that question. Irrespective of you having an MBA degree, you could have done an MS or an MSc or even a PhD for that matter. But you have to be ready with why ISB. The alums would be interested to understand, even though it doesn't hold any negative marking as such, but they will definitely be wanting to understand that why a second MBA or why a second master's or why do you want this stint of ISB. So I think you need to have clarity of thoughts of what you are getting into and why you're getting into. I'm again repeating that be absolutely sure of what you're getting into. Keep asking yourself the why, not just why ISB wants this information, also whatever you're entering, the information that you're entering, why am I writing this? Why do I really need it? So if you are very clear that you need the second MBA, I'm sure you should be ready with points, identify those gaps, identify how ISB can pitch in, because ultimately that is all that we want to understand. We've covered this point, right? That what the panelists are looking for, that how ISB fits in your story. So if you've asked yourself the right questions, if you're ready with those basics about I have identified these gaps and this is how ISB will help fill this gap and this is how I'm going to leverage the ISB as a platform, you're good to go.
Right. Okay, and this is something that also becomes a reason for concern for many, that
Yeah.
they may have dropped a year after their 12th standard,
Right.
or someone was preparing for their UPSC exam for a year or two or three after their graduate studies. So how does
Right.
ISB look at these gap years?
Right, right. Very true, Prashant. So guys, you need to first understand that ISB truly believes in strength-based evaluation. We've talked about what goes on at the interview day, also what happens behind the scene. In the entire process, if you would have realized, it's a very positive approach to the recruitment. It's not a round of elimination. We want to absorb you in our community. So the entire endeavor is to find the best, to give you an opportunity to showcase your strengths. So it's a strength based evaluation that we follow at ISP, which means that we are all trained to not look at, for example, in this case, a gap. It was a decision that you had to make possibly at that point of your life. We respect that and we give you enough and more space for that. There will be no negative marking for this, possibly no questions around the gap as well. So it's just okay, for whatever reason, personal or professional, you had to take this decision. It's okay. What is more important to ISB again is what is it that you're doing now? What is it that you want to do next? How serious are you about your future, about your career, about the why ISB and how ISB can help you? We're more interested in the now story. And it's okay. Again, it's done something in the past and move on.
Right. So there may be a gap, but then instead of looking at the fact that, oh, this candidate has a gap year, let's not consider him, the school will
Absolutely.
look at this candidate has done some great things despite the gap, so let's look at that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah.
Great. And this is again a very interesting question. is ISB considering the market conditions? Does and just to throw some more light on probably where the question is coming from. So a lot of international schools look at the market
Mhm.
conditions in terms of designing their class. I mean, most business schools know what kind of class they are looking to build in the coming year, and that's
Right,
obviously a learning from the previous years.
right.
So how does it work at ISB? And is there any science behind it, or is it just by chance?
Great. So, well, there is no science around it. There is absolutely no calculated mathematical approach to it. We do not look at, for example, in this case, the macroeconomic or the microeconomic situation of the particular industry. For that matter, be it the 2008 recession or the 2020 pandemic, we have been able to successfully place all our students irrespective of the industry, irrespective of the function. So that has never been a concern at ISB, because we know we have collaborations with 1,000 plus organizations, and we have a rock solid team of 30 plus trained professionals who have been doing it for very many 20 plus years now. So that has never been a concern, and that will never come in the way of a selection process of a candidature. All you have to work on is showcasing your case, irrespective of you coming from a technical industry which is possibly on a downturn now. Why should your candidature be penalized at all? You are a great student, you will add to the community, go for it.
Right. And what's interesting to observe or probably analyze is that the downturn is not something that is sustained. I mean, at least in India, it is not sustained for a couple of years.
Right.
So the students that are already in class, they just have to face the downturn. They are not there by design for a planned downturn. They
Yeah.
have to cope with it, and the ISB Career Advancement Services, the CAS team, has been able to do a great job at getting the right companies and
Right.
getting, and then average placements have been increasing year on year. There has been significant jump this year,
Right.
and by the time the new class comes in, probably the downturn is gone. So it's an year long process of placements as
And
well
we
as
all know
admission.
that India is a recession free country right now with the lowest unemployability rate. So we are facing no challenges. It's the placement season on right now at the campus. So the placements are going on. The peak week is going to be the 25th to 27th of the November. So it's great. I mean, I think doesn't look like a challenge at all.
Right. And okay. So this is again related to the fact that we talked about how GMAT
Right.
scores are not accessible to certain teams. So
Yes.
then does GMAT come into picture, or how does it work?
It does come into the picture. It is one of the parameters on which the profiles are assessed, are evaluated, our scores are assigned. So it's a back-end engine which takes care of. So if an X score, if you have a particular score, X points will be awarded to that, and that is taken care by the engine, the algorithm. There is no human intervention there because nobody has access to that part of your application apart from the engine itself.
Right. And this is a long question. To sum it up, different universities have different
Yes.
ways of assigning percentages.
Right.
So how does ISB look at that? Are there ratings for universities, or uh, how do you compare?
Right. So, Prashant, again, not just university, we face a similar challenge when it comes to 10th, 12th, CBSE versus ISC versus ICSE. So, here again, all of this is already fed into the system. We have enough and more permutation combination of the universities and the credibility they hold with respect to awarding of the marks and scores. So, this component is also taken care by the engine itself. We do not assign any scores for anything that can be measured like the scores, be it GMAT, GRE, be it the academic scores. All of this, again, the engine takes care.
Right. So
But
there's no manual
and we do
interventions.
yes, and we do understand that there is a certain credibility that a UP board will hold vis-a-vis a CBSE, either an ICSE. So all of this is already part of the algorithm, the backend algorithm.
Right. So the right amount of weights to the university you're from,
Yes.
the percentages, and of course the GMAT and GRE and everything.
And for that matter, if I may also add, Prashant, that when we when it comes to professional canvas as well, right? You could be a manager in an X company, you could be a manager in a Y company, but a manager in X company could be a mid-senior role, vis-a-vis a manager in a Y company could be a fairly senior role, right? Some companies are agnostic of hierarchy and they have a very flat pyramid. So that also the engine takes care. So it's designed to that nitty-gritty.
Great. Good. I think we have been able to answer most of the questions. I mean, there are quite a few other questions, but I see that they may be specific to specific profiles. But quite a few questions that we were able to take, and I must admit that most of your answers were very insightful, and we were able to learn a few things which were very new in terms of how the process works behind the scenes. So thank you for being so candid, and thank you for taking
Pleasure for
out
me,
time. Before we close, one question which is relevant to the audience. Any comments on round three application deadline? Is it going to be January, February, December? Any hints? Any teasers out there?
All right. So, yes, R3 is happening. R3 tentatively will be scheduled mid-Jan, and dates will be announced shortly. So, stay tuned.
Okay, perfect. Thanks again. Thanks everyone for joining, and for your participation, for all the interesting questions. Thanks, Richa. Thanks again for all your insights, and we wish all the best for R1 as well as R2 candidates for now, and R3 when it comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant, for hosting us. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us tonight.